Joining us now for our daily analysis of the federal election races, CTV News political commentator Scott Reid. Scott, good to see you this morning.
Morning, guys.
So let's get into it here. The Trump tariffs, of course, having an impact on the campaign. I mean, look, the campaign is basically about the Trump tariffs, it would seem. But yesterday in particular and today, Scott, what are we looking for? And what do you see from what happened yesterday?
So a couple of things. Yesterday, you can make the case that Canada was spared, at least spared the worst swing of lumber as compared to some other countries. There were no new additional tariffs applied yesterday, but today it's sort of like waking up with a hangover and we realize, oh my God, it is settling in here. So we know that today the tariffs on autos are in force. We're reminded, of course, of the tariffs that are in place on steel and aluminum. Windsor, Stellantis last night sending out word, the first immediate and concrete reaction to Donald Trump, saying that they're going to be shutting down production in Windsor for at least 2 weeks, and then they're going to reevaluate going forward. Don't be surprised if you see more statements like that coming out of the auto sector, which employs 500,000 people across the country. So I think you're going to see Mark Carney today is going to convene in his role as prime minister, all the premiers together, talk about retaliatory tariffs in response to aluminum and steel and auto, now that that picture has become a little bit clearer, although it's not terribly clear. So we're going to get into the formal trade war aspect of this. You're going to see the retaliations from Canada. They'll be announced. And then you're going to start to see retaliatory tariffs from all around the world. The many, many, many countries that have had 25, 35, 45% tariffs slapped on them yesterday. And of course, that is going to make people anxious because the last time a president made an announcement of that kind, it deepened and lengthened the Great Depression. And so you really do worry that the war against Canada on trade has now turned into a world war, and that won't necessarily have much good for us.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's easy to say, oh, we kind of got spared. But when you look at it collectively, you know, Carney's saying that this is a threat to the international trading system. Eventually, we get sucked into that. All right, so let's focus on the Conservatives right now. Pierre Poilievre in Oshawa. Is there any chance he can kind of save what's left in this area for him and his party?
Look, I wouldn't count the guy out by any stretch of the imagination. He had a rally last night, you know, in the midst of all of this. And it's an astonishing thing. In all my years in politics, you don't see phenomena like this. He has a rally of 5,000, 6,000 people at the same time that we're sitting here on TV with Nick Nanos's numbers saying that they're losing the election. So, you know, his ability to draw, his ability to connect with his voter coalition, it's very intense. He's going to hold a news conference this morning. He'll be out before the prime minister. So let's see what he has to say and how he situates himself vis-a-vis trade and Trump. Yesterday, he dedicated most of his morning to that issue, really struck a different tone, talked about a plan to manage Trump and trade. That was a shift in strategy and focus for them. Will he sustain it? And then tonight, he's in Oshawa for another of those giant rallies. But of course, Oshawa, you're talking an auto town. You're talking about people who are worried about their jobs and whether the plant's going to be shut down. So again, it'll be an opportunity for him to fit within this issue set.
And Scott, what about that contrast, right? Because on the one hand, you talk about the big crowds at Poilievre rallies. Those are impressive. Every political observer talks about that. But then the flip side, the internal sort of, you know, machinations and changes in the Conservative strategy in terms of how tough he goes after Trump and maybe the messaging, you know, tweaking the messaging a little bit like that. We're 12 days in. Is this, I mean, it's never too late, I suppose, but is this like the right time in the campaign now to sort of make that shift for Poilievre?
Well, it's a very awkward thing to do because, you know, when those 5,000 people show up for a Pierre Poilievre rally, they want the red meat and the greatest hits. They want to see him lay the lumber on Mark Carney and the Liberals. That's what motivates those voters. But we know now, we have 12 days of laboratory experiments that tell us it is failing with the wider public. And so he's got to make this shift and concentrate more. He must pass the test of who is the best leader to take on Trump. He's losing that test to Mark Carney. And today, with all the powers and authority of prime minister, it's hard to imagine that he's going to compete much with Mark Carney on that front. So as much as the crowd wants him to talk about putting liberal heads on pikes, he's going to have to shift his focus, continue to shift his focus, and hope that the level of concentration on Donald Trump begins to ease now once we get this next couple days past us. I'm not sure that's going to happen. I don't really count much on Donald Trump going quiet. That's never happened in my experience. But for the Conservatives, they need Trump to go quiet, and they've got to continue to make this pivot toward trade issues, or Pierre Poilievre will enter the debates in a week or two in real trouble.
It's so interesting how one man, has the entire election campaign pretty much in his control. So
Not
we'll
in
see
this country.
what happens. Okay, CTV's political commentator Scott Reid joining us live. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, guys.